Now therefore fear the Lord, and serve him in sincerity and in truth, and put away the gods which your fathers served on the other side of the flood, and in Egypt, and serve ye the Lord. And if it seem evil unto you to serve the Lord, choose you this day whom ye will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served that were on the other side of the flood, or the gods of the Amorites, in whose land ye dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Joshua 24:14 and 15. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the GapFillers podcast once again. My name is Michael Bradford. This is episode number 7. DOGE is full steam ahead once again on the Department of Education this time, going through the records and wasteful spending that's going through there, while they dig through the IRS as well, which is interesting. The Florida legislature and Ron DeSantis have finally agreed on a compromised bill to help out with the Trump immigration crackdown. And then the Army was found with BAS funds being distributed to other than what they were originally meant for, which is the basic allowance for sustenance. So we'll cover all of that. First things first, I want to reiterate that we have elections coming up here in Central Florida. Here in Orange County, you have a few different municipalities with voting this upcoming month, March 11th. It will be Ocoee, Winter Park, Windermere, Maitland, and Belle Isle. So be prepared for that if you live within those municipal districts. As I've said before, this is where most of your local ordinances come from, and this is a major cause of tyranny that are commonly overlooked because they're easy to forget. There's not a lot of money in them, and so this is one thing I actually do want to highlight is your money in politics is often only because people do not pay attention. If people would pay attention and do due diligence and do the put in the work to that is the responsibility of a citizen of self-government, money would have very little, if any, force of maneuvering. Now, it would help dig up stuff and stuff like that. However, if something is discovered, especially in today's day and age, money would have very little impact on the outcome of a race. I've personally have dug into several different candidates, presidential candidates that I voted for third party before, and I would say their names and you wouldn't know who they were, like Darrell Castle. I get that one, and people instantly think of the Punisher because that's Castle is the last name of the Punisher. the Marvel character. But Darrell Castle was running for the Constitution Party in 2016. Very little money, very little media attention, practically none. But it's one of those things. If you do your due diligence and you research and you dig into and you put in the work, you earn the right to vote. Whereas the idea of just voting because everybody's talking about it is not the idea of self-governance. And in fact, the more people are talking about a vote, the less power you have, the less power your vote holds, because it inflates the value of voting, which means it takes more votes to make a difference. As money to buy eggs. So once again, March 11th, Belle Isle, Maitland, Windermere, Winter Park, and Ocoee here in Orange County. Throughout the state, later on this year, you do have one big election congressional, campaign up in St. Augustine area, all the way over to Ocala, to replace Mike Waltz. And then you also have a Florida Senate race in Brevard County. So just pay attention to those. Those are coming up later this year. I'll highlight more of that as they get closer. But so on to our first topic. DeSantis signs immigration bill after hours after lawmakers have passed them. So for those of you who have not listened to my previous podcasts or may not be in tune with local politics in Florida, the state legislature has been kind of feuding in a way with DeSantis, determining on how much power the governor should have over immigration as opposed to other portions of government. The legislature came up with their own plan, and DeSantis wasn't happy with it, primarily because it gave power to the Secretary of Agriculture instead of the governor in order to enforce immigration. Immigration. The Secretary of Agriculture in Florida has an equivalent, it's a slightly less power than the governor. It's not like a cabinet position at the federal level. It is much more has much more control over policy and enforcement, just as the AG is. These are all statewide election positions as opposed to appointees. So here are some key elements from the bill. It has a price tag of $298 million as opposed to the $550 million that the state legislature wanted to put in originally. It creates 80 new positions. It creates a federal or state immigration board, which the governor, the agricultural commissioner, the attorney general, and the state chief financial officer are all members of. And this board will create a commission of law enforcement officers to advise on policy and enforcement and direction for immigration enforcement. So that's the bill that was passed. It also creates quite a few other things. Some other things it did is makes the death penalty for convicted of capital crimes. So if you're a legal immigrant and you are convicted of murder and sexual abuse of a minor under 12, you are eligible for the death penalty. It also repeals the in-state tuition for people who are illegal immigrants, and therefore the state won't be supplementing the tuition of illegal immigrants. Now, while the price tag might seem hefty, it's about $298 million. This is not much when you compare to the fact that Orlando is spending $60 million on refurbishing Lake Eola. So it's 1/5 of the price, or even though it's 1/5 of the price, come on, there's not that much money comparative to a lot of other government spending on frivolous programs. So this is something that is trying. I think DeSantis might try to run for a national stage again. Probably not president. I see him running for possibly Senate or I don't know. He might try to run for a cabinet position in the next election. But it remains to be seen, because after Trump, there's no big, obvious person to take the stage. J.D. Vance is a popular choice, but Trump this past week had kind of shot that down just a little bit and said he doesn't view him as the obvious person to take up his mantle. Now, that doesn't mean it's not an endorsement, but it also is kind of leaving the door open for other hopefuls. Marco Rubio's probably on that stage as well. So, all right. So the next topic I want to talk about here is DOGE. So DOGE has now entered into the Department of Education and the IRS. A lot of fiscal conservatives are really happy, and libertarians are happy about this one, because the IRS and the Department of Education are viewed as some of the biggest purveyors of liberal ideology or enforcement. The IRS has been accused of going after a lot of conservatives and audit, because audits are legal, and so there's more than one way to skin a cat and go after somebody and make it look legal, and audits would be a good way of doing that. And there's been quite a few cases where it's very shady on that. And then the Department of Education is just a propaganda machine in the schools. There's no, ever since it was founded in 40, 50 years ago now, the test scores have gone way downhill, and spending on education has gone way up. So the ROI is obviously negative. This is, if people think throwing money at something makes it go away. No, it only amplifies if it's a good solution, it amplifies. Money is always that way. It's always an amplifier. And it amplifies. It's a standard of power and value. And so if something is bad, and then you throw more money at it, it becomes just that much worse. And the government is always lacking an incentive structure, and it's trying to perpetuate its role. And so once they take over education, they don't want education to improve and take their responsibility away. They want to double down and double down always. So, but Mike Benz was he worked for the State Department, and he went on a few major podcasts, primarily the Sean Ryan and Joe Rogan's show. This past week, and he laid out why USAID looked the way it did. He basically laid out how the CIA and USAID were kind of working hand in hand, because USAID was was an independent agency, so it didn't answer to a secretary, and it didn't answer to the president, and so it had discretionary funds. Whereas the CIA had to, was the major thing that the CIA had to do was anytime there was a covert operation, they had to go to the president. This was, the cliff notes of 4-hour conversations. And so there's, anytime you saw promoting democracy in Serbia or something like that, millions of dollars sent to Pakistan for the defense of democracy or voter integrity or something like that. Those were all supposedly covert CIA operations, which means basically it was a way of getting an agent money into that country to shift how they voted or viewed policy and make a friendly government to the U.S. To be honest, what good is an ally if every time you're turning around and having to spend another $500 million here, $10 million here, you're wasting blood and treasure on protecting people who are leaning away from you. Now, a lot of this is counteracting government, enemy, agents like China and Russia. And that's part of the reason why TikTok was banned, and because TikTok was basically if you think about this, the TikTok was basically a communist version of USAID in a way. They manipulate an algorithm. In fact, we did this in Cuba supposedly with our own version of Twitter. So that's what he laid out. He seemed, very knowledgeable in that situation. I'm always, always wanting to back up and not jump hook, line, and sinker into somebody's conspiracy, but that definitely seemed like a plausible area of, of why we were spending millions of dollars. Not that it makes it right. 100%. Nope. I am fully against it still. However, that is the idea. Is that people are manipulated by it's basically a massive psychological program, warfare against China and Russia and whoever people view as enemies. But that's kind of why we got into the war in Iraq and the war in Afghanistan. Is we're fighting these wars and and why we took out Gaddafi in Libya. But consistently, what happens is that the CIA likes to play whack-a-mole, and they today's enemy is yesterday's CIA program. The Taliban was created or heavily funded by the CIA to fight the Soviet Union, and then 20 years later, they were fighting them because of 9/11, and then. If you just go down the line, you get these strong men in power to control a region, and then all of a sudden they're not doing what we want, and then we have to find a way to get rid of them, and that's not it's not right or moral to do that. Especially if we're disguising it in the way of self-determination, Why are we defending Kuwait from a strong man when Kuwait is a strong man, just the same, just a weaker strong man? And Ukraine's a similar situation. Ukraine's definitely not known for being a moral and upright and uncorrupt society, and we're defending them against Russia, which is the same pot calling the kettle black kind of deal. And basically innocent people get caught in the crossfire, and this is the idea that good men need to stand up and take their country back, by themselves, or at least heavily for themselves, and the idea that the U.S. needs to interfere in every single portion of the world stage is just ludicrous. I mean, this kind of goes with Israel too. Why are we funding Israel billions of dollars to fight a small little country? Well, people say, well, Iran. Well, they're not fighting Iran directly. And so why get wrapped up into a war where we're going to be dragged into that? So, there's much left to be seen on DOGE. Millions of dollars, billions of dollars actually have been saved, and every little bit that we can squeeze from the government is a positive in my direction. The Democrats are starting to coalesce. They're getting judges to fight back and help freezes, but earlier this week a judge unfroze the freezes. So the hirings or the firings rather are going forward. Over 70,000 government employees have accepted the buyout plan of the 7-month buyout plan from Trump. So over 70,000 employees have left the federal government, which is a really good positive. 10,000 supposedly are looking at being fired from the IRS. I'm not sure if that includes the 80,000 that Biden just hired last year. And Trump has threatened to put those IRS agents on the border, which is not a bad idea. Either they'll quit or hopefully do their job. In a way, maybe it's better to just not have them there, because if they are gumming up the works like a typical government worker, that could be bad. So, the last topic I want to talk about is BAS and the Army. So, according to military.com, The Army is repurposing more than half of the money it collects from junior enlisted soldiers for food, according to military data reviewed by military.com. The number suggests that a large portion of those funds are not going towards feeding soldiers, a diversion of resources coming at a time when troops increasingly struggle to find nutritious foods on base. $460 is the current BAS payment, and only half of that is going to feed troops. Surprise, surprise there. For those of you who don't know, I was in the Army and I was stationed at Fort Bliss during my 3 years, and there was very rarely a good time to be at a DFAC. A DFAC is a dining facility, is an acronym for a dining facility in the military, or at least in the Army. And these DFACs were always, they were understaffed or didn't have the right amount of food, and always long lines. The food was, bland and, very low quality. I would actually time out my paycheck to people would eat out on payday, and then after 2 weeks they would be strapped for cash, so they would be eating at the DFAC, and that's what I would eat out, because that would lessen the line on both ends. So, but the BAS is basically a joke in the military. There's no arguing that most of the money is wasted. You get runny eggs in the morning and potatoes, and maybe a small strip of bacon, and then for dinner there's barely ever anything for dinner. There, major holidays, there was always closed. There was always, sometimes they would go to a field event, and out of 3 brigades in the 1st Armored Division, you'd have 3 brigades worth of troops going to one dining facility because the other dining facility is closed, or the other 2 were closed. And so there was never a really good time to go to a dining facility at Fort Bliss, at least. There was it always needed reform. There's a 1,000 things that need to be reformed in the Army, and I'm hoping DOGE will take a look at that seriously. Elon Musk had highlighted mandatory fund days. The page mandatory fund day was highlighting online training, which is just an absurd thing in the Army. They have terrible animation for some stupid reason that doesn't help you learn. It's ridiculous. It's one of those things that it's not like it's like high quality, and it's not like it helps you learn, and it's just a waste of money and time. So there, and then you need a certain security computer with a CAT card reader, and so you're stuck here doing online training when you could be doing something else. And what most people I know did is they just blanket answer the question until they found out what the right answer was, and then they would just because you couldn't fail this, so you just kept on redoing it because the questions were obscure, the SSD ones and what you needed to do for promotions and stuff like that, they were all ridiculous. One thing I want to focus on is something called a spendex. When we would go to a field event, and as far as I know, this is Army wide. You would have a certain amount of ammunition allocated for training events, which training event, it's good. Well, we're doing our weapons qual or something like that, and what ends up happening is you get 3 boxes of ammunition in a wood box, right? You break the seal, you have to shoot the ammo. Because signing it out after the seal's been broken, or signing it back to the Army or to supply or whoever they got it from the I forget the name of it, but there's signing out to the the munitions officer or whoever was a huge pain. So what we would do is called a spendex. After the end of a mission, we're done. We have 1,000 rounds of ammunition left. Well, we can't take it back, and we have to. We signed it out, but we can't use it. Personal use, or we can't. So we ended up just loading up magazines just to shoot. Like literally not training shooting, like just putting it in a gun and putting it on your shoulder and just shooting it downrange, then collecting the brass. That's the extent of Army efficiency right there. And that you can think of a round of 5.56. Nowadays it's going for roughly 66 cents a round. Back then it was more closely to 30 to 40 cents. What the Army pays for it, I don't know. However, it's still probably close to 50 cents a round at minimum. So between in government spending, they're probably paying a full dollar just because. So you can think of it as a dollar a round. Pull the trigger, dollar. Pull the trigger, a dollar. Well, do that 1,000 times. That's $1,000. Do that over an entire brigade. That's tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars. Do that across the Army, and you're probably talking into the millions, if not billions, of just wasted ammunition because paperwork is too rattlesnake hard. Because Army loves the paperwork of red tape and garbage, just because of over 200 years now of paperwork, adding something, duplicates and stuff like that, and they end up being redundant instead of being efficient and streamlined. They become redundant because you're trying to train an 18-year-old and a 30-year-old, and so you have to treat a 30-year-old like an 18-year-old. Some of them acted like an 18-year-old, but again, you're always playing to the middle because it's a government program. There's very little room for maneuverability and discretion, because if it's left to discretion, you're left responsible, and nobody wants to be left responsible for an 18-year-old burning up their barracks down because of a toaster. So, if for those of you who don't know, there's some policies that you weren't allowed to have a toaster because of in your barracks room, because people have burnt toast and caused fires and ended up, there was at least once a month we would end up sitting on the front stoop of the barracks waiting for fire department to turn off the alarm because somebody got hungry and decided to cook rice at 2:00 in the morning. So, there's thousands of different policies that the Army needs to reform. I always thought the BAS was one of the first ones. Give it to the soldiers as a back pay, right? So you take the previous month's pay, and if they didn't go to the DFAC, you refund them the money. So say back then it was $320, I believe, a month. Okay, so I allocate that $10 a day or $11 a day, or and then divide it by meal. So say it's $3 a meal. Okay, well, if I don't eat a meal at a DFAC, I should get that money back. So at the end of the month, whatever I don't use of that $320 should be lump summed into BAS, the next month's BAS. But that's not what happens. They take the entire thing, and then they'll close down the DFACs and feed you a thing of a granola bar and call it a day, as opposed to if you're married and not living in the barracks, or you're an officer, they don't have this problem. Now they have to bring their own food and stuff like that, or they have to pay for the DFAC. But very rarely did that ever happen because, frankly, the DFAC food was garbage. So, there was a million and one ways I was looking at when I was in to get a waiver to get the 320, because I could cook a meal for 10 guys for $10 and make a lasagna or something, and that's what the DFAC is. The idea behind the DFAC is with most things, it's trying to be economies of scale, but it fails because there's no profit incentive behind it. So if you have the economies of scale, which is you try to feed thousands of people, if you feed thousands of people, your cost per person goes down, but in doing so, the quality goes down, unless you have a price incentive, unless there's a chance that you lose out. Buffets kind of try to tread that line, like Golden Corral tries to tread the line between, quantity and quality. They often fail. Buffets often fail on quality, but they try to make it up in quantity. Whereas, trying to feed, 1,000 troops, or if you do it right, it can be done, but it takes discipline and responsibility and major incentive, and nobody in government really has that, outside of a few autistic people that just view it as numbers, and they want the best numbers possible, kind of like DOGE. So, that's it. All I have for you today. I appreciate you all for joining me. If you have any comments, questions, you can find me on X at GapFillers 1776. You can find me on Facebook, GapFillers Podcast, the official Facebook page. Coming up here, and maybe this next week or the week after, I'm definitely going to try to look at getting diversifying my podcast platforms. Apple Music, it looks promising, and maybe a couple others, SoundCloud, because I've talked to several people that have tried to get onto the podcast from the Facebook page, and it's not working. So if you do have a problem, let me know. I would greatly appreciate some feedback on issues and stuff like that, so I can have them rectified, to put out the best quality product for you. Once again, thank you for joining me, and have a good week.